What's up, you guys? I'm here with a new video today, and we're here to talk about how to beat Mekk-Knight Invoked. You guys highly requested this in the community tab. Already did one episode on how to beat Pendulum, so this is the next deck in the meta. For those of you that have been paying attention to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, you guys will see that Mekk-Knight Invoked is topping and winning everywhere. The deck is absolutely insane. The deck pretty much premiered at YCS Atlanta when Base Lolly made it to day 2, almost topped the event with it. The deck is insane. Like, it came out of left field, and a lot of people weren't prepared for it, so it did really well at that event. And just more people, I think, have researched into it and seen just how powerful the deck really is. The Mekk-Knights add like a whole new dimension to the already strong Invoked engine, and the fact that you can combine the two together is absolutely insane. For those of you that are unfamiliar, I'm just going to go just a quick rundown. You guys already know about Alistair. You guys already know about Invoked. Alistair searches Invocation. Invocation makes your fusions. Meltdown gets you Alistair. Terraforming gets you Meltdown. You play 9 copies of Alistair. Pretty simple. You guys already know. You guys already know Mekaba and Purgatrio are the main ones they're playing. They also play Elysium because you are able to make it. Some randomly will play Megalancia. The Earth one will randomly play Raijin, the Wind one, but outside of that, those are pretty much the only invokes you'll be facing down as far as their fusion goes. But the main thing we're here to talk about is the Mekk-Knight part of the deck. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with just a quick breakdown of the monsters, so Blue Sky, they all have the same clause. You special them when there's 2 or more cards in the column, and what Blue Sky does is it adds Mekk-Knight monsters equal to the amount of cards in your opponent's column. So that one's obviously just really good. That one and Purple Nightmare, the next one, are pretty much the main ones. What you do is it's like a wind-up rabbit. You target one Mekk-Knight you control, banish it until your next standby phase, and you add a Mekk-Knight to your hand. So banish, search, pretty cool, just like wind up rabbit. Then there's Indigo Eclipse. This one is basically the monster mover. It basically targets another monster, another Mekk-Knight, moves it to another column, to another main monster zone. So that's just really cool. You can manipulate your columns, and it works really well with the next one, which is Mekk-Knight, Red Moon. So basically what you do with this one is that you can banish a Mekk-Knight engrave, target a monster in the column, destroy it. What's really cool is with Indigo Eclipse, you can move it, you can summon Red Moon, use its effect, then you can move it with Indigo, pop another card, so basically you can pop 2 cards. Pretty cool, comes up a lot from what I've heard from Mekk-Knight players, so pretty cool. And then the last one I am going to cover, because I have heard some people talking about wanting to just test with it a little bit. It's not actually something you see in too many of the top lists, but it's Mekk-Knight Yellow Star. So basically it's the same as Red Moon, except that this one you banish a Mekk-Knight engrave just like the other one, but this one instead targets and destroys a spell or trap. So that's pretty relevant because people were talking about, yeah, anti-spell is a problem, deck plays a lot of spells, so it's just something to take into consideration. So those are the breakdown of the Mekk-Knights, and then of course I've already broken down the Invoked engine, which you guys I think by now should be familiar with. I've also profiled Invoked cards, so you guys should know pretty much what they do. And it's pretty crazy, the 2 decks really synergize well together, and the reason why is because it gives Invoked a win condition besides Invocation. It gives Invoked beat sticks. It gives them the ability to to link summon even more. It gives them the ability to just completely just OTK the opponent because the Mekk-Knights are huge, and I think it's just really cool. The deck is already a going second deck, so the fact that you're adding more going second cards to it that actually can do something, can actually just break boards and just OTK the opponent is crazy. They are also light, which is very relevant because Mekaba is the main Invoke that you are summoning most of the time. I mean, you do play hand traps just like regular Invoked, but you play Veiler, you play Ogre, then you play Ash, so you do have the ability to make Purgatrio, but a lot of times you're just making Mekaba, sit on Mekaba, win the game. Just a very standard play for a control-based deck like Invoke. So we're talking about, all right, how do we beat this deck? What is, this deck's weakness, just like we did with Pendulums in the first episode? So the main thing to talk about is actually one of the simplest things with this deck that actually make it, that actually give it its flaw. It's one of its biggest weaknesses that it is a going second deck, and that is actually huge. Most decks, can build themselves to go second, but some are actually solely a going second deck, and Invoked is 100% that type of deck. Because if you think of what your turn 1 play would be, if you're meant to go first and you summon Alistair, you get Invocation, and you kind of just pass. Unless you really want to waste a hand trap in hand like Valor or Ogre to make a Mekaba. I mean, you can do that, but that's really not that strong. You just wasted a hand trap that you could have used against your opponent when they make their play. So a lot of times your only play in reality is to set Scapegoat and pass if you open Scapegoat, because at least Scapegoat gives you 4 monsters to wall up. You also have your hand traps to combat your opponent. Then you can end phase flip Goat, start linking on your turn. But outside of that, the deck is not strong going first. So one of the biggest issues is that the opponent will realize, okay, my opponent's playing this deck. You know, if they ended up winning the die roll, going second, you realize, okay, I don't want that to happen again, so you make them go first, and their deck does suffer going first. Mekk-Knights suffer especially because they need the opponent to establish columns. That's the biggest thing with this deck, is that they really are reliant on your opponent doing something. So if your opponent doesn't do anything, or your opponent clears their field, like if they're playing 60 cards and they banish the Omegas, and they don't leave that much out for you or whatever, depending on what deck it is, you just you really don't get to play your deck. So I feel that is actually one of the easiest ways to beat this deck, is once you realize that, okay, I'm playing against Mekk-Knight Invoked, make them go first. Like, straight up, make them go first, because their starting play is not going to be that strong. Now, granted, on the flip side of that, you have to take into account that Mekk-Knight Invoked players, they're smart. They know they're probably going to make me go first. So they're going to side in cards that are going to floodgate you out when they go first. So you just need to take that into consideration when, adjusting your side deck strategy, knowing that, hey, they might be playing some floodgates that'll stop my deck. I better be prepared and have some really strong going second cards for them. So that's just something to take into account, guys, because I know for a fact that if you just solely let them go first, game 2, if they win game 1, game 2, and they just floodgate you out, you might have just lost the match. So you need to take that into consideration. Just really play smart and side deck properly for that. So that's one of their biggest flaws. What's one of their other flaws? So they don't play any of the spells or traps. I have not seen any of them really play it. I did hear some buzz about the World Legacy trap. I don't know if they played in the main deck. It might be in the side deck, but they don't really have, any ways to really search any of that stuff, so it's not something I'm really going to cover, because if you look at all the lists, you guys, it's basically just they have the Mekk-Knights to search out the monsters, because that's all they play. They play the Invoke, they beat down the opponent, and they link away and they just win. So that's the way the deck really plays, plus it plays a lot of hand traps. Another thing with this deck is it does have, in a sense, like kind of a hard time recovering. So if you do break their board, even if they go second, they don't kill you, and then you come back and break their board, they kind of have a hard time coming back, because they kind of establish everything with their Mekk-Knights. They summon, and if you do have a way to break that board, if they don't actually OTK you, you can stop them with hand traps or goats or anything like that, and then you can come back on your turn and break their board. They kind of have a hard time coming back. Now, granted, Alistair, without a doubt, is probably the best one-card engine in the game. They do play 9 copies of Alistair, but at the same time, it's not, if you do have a way to Valor the Alistair, or Ash the Alistair, or stop the Alistair from resolving so they don't get to Invocation, they're playing basically half of their engine. They're playing basically just Mekk-Knights at that point. Now, granted, they can keep playing, but it's not going to be as strong as if they had access to both their engines. So that's another thing to think about. And really good cards against that, like I said, Effect Valor. Effect Valor shuts down Alistair. Ash Blossom shuts down Alistair. Let them go Terraforming, don't Ash the Terraforming. Let them go Meltdown, don't Ash the Meltdown. Let them summon Alistair, Ash the Alistair, because then they don't get anything off the Alistair. Now, granted, on the flip side again, they are upping the count to usually 3 invocations. It used to be just 2. Some people were crazy enough to only play 1. I don't know how, but they do play, most of the decks play 3 invocation, because if Alistair does get stopped and they are able to hard draw the invocation, they keep playing, and you actually just went -1 because you wasted a hand trap. Their Alistair didn't search an invocation, but they had an invocation, and they're resolving it and getting their invoked fusion, and you just wasted a hand trap. So take that into account as well. So that can be a huge thing for the deck, is that hand traps does hurt them. Now, I'm talking mostly about the Invoked engine, because the deck is basically comprised up of the Alistairs, the Mekk-Knights, and hand traps. So you just have to take that into account. Like I said, being a going second deck, that's how they play. Other things to just really talk about is that Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre is actually really good against them from what I've heard. If you Ogre Blue Storm, I believe they don't search. There's been some interactions, like in some deck profiles I've heard, where if you ogre them at the right time, they don't search with blue storm, because the columns have been disrupted and stuff like that. So ogre is actually really good against them. Valor is not really that good against the Mekk-Knights, but it's good against Alistair, which is like one of the main hitters of the deck. The Mekk-Knights were just added to the deck, you guys. So remember that while the Mekk-Knights are the beat sticks, the Invoked is really how they control the game, because Mekka really is a pain. So remember that, plus all the hand traps that actually work with their elements, which is crazy. So that's another thing to take into account. Other ways to beat them, outside of making them go first, is just being smart of how you play your cards. If you know that they rely on your columns, just play your cards smartly. Create a field that they can't break. That's another thing, is if you can build a pretty much unbreakable board, or a board where they're not going to be able to really play through it, you're probably most likely going to win. Because one problem this deck has is, okay, if you only set up a couple things, they'll play into your columns, they'll get their pluses and they'll probably overpower you. But if you create a really powerful board, like a board that 60 cards put up with double Omega and a Snow Engrave and maybe a Curious or a Link Monster. Granted, they might be able to do a little bit of column tricks, but if you take away cards from their hand with Omega, if you have if you have Snow to stop any of their pushes, they don't really get to OTK you, and then you just push back the next turn. And that's the thing, is that, like I said, the deck has mediocre recovery, so their ability to break their board is actually really important. Other cards I've seen people using against this deck, it's interesting, is they do play Torrential. Torrential is a card I actually have seen. Like, I've seen in some dueling book games, I've seen it on some YGO Pro games, that people will side in Torrential, and they will just, set it, and then, you guys know how it is. People play into Torrential. Torrential's at 3, you guys. Don't overextend. Don't be blind to the fact that Torrential, is at 3 and that people aren't playing it. People do play it. Johnny and I played 3 copies at YCS Atlanta. It's just one of those cards that you punish bad players, you punish overextenders, and you punish people who are just greedy when trying to OTK, and they walk on a Torrential, and then they basically end their turn, and then you push back again. So those are other things to think about. I'm sure there are a lot of other cards that might not actually see play in the meta that people know that actually work against this deck. I wouldn't suggest ever using anything like Kaijus or Raw Sphere Mode or anything like that, because basically, like, they're going to make Macabre, they're going to do whatever. I mean, we already know Raw Sphere Mode is for Pendulum Magicians, and Kaijus are for Masterpiece, etc. Another thing is they do actually suffer against True Draco, because Draco, like, if Draco goes first, they can make, they make a Masterpiece. That's kind of hard for them to out. They make a... a lot of times Draco wants to go second, so Mekk-Knights don't really have a play, and then True Draco is just like, all right, I'm just going to go off. So, there's other things like that. There's just different deck interactions, but overall, I think the deck is really cool. I'm actually a fan, in case people are wondering. Besides 60 cards, I do really like Invoked. I think Mekk-Knights are really cool. I think the names for them are awesome. I think the artwork is awesome. I think the fact that the 2 main ones are secret is awesome. And I think that it's just going to be a deck we're going to have to just prepare for in this meta. And I feel like just videos like this can help you guys better prepare to mentally think that, this is a going second deck. You need to really strategize when going against it, because then you will be successful in beating the deck. You will know that you made the best plays possible, and you'll know that in the future, when the deck evolves or changes or whatever, you'll already have the knowledge of how to beat the deck. So even when it does change a little bit, you can continue to, combat it in pretty much every format. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say, you guys. I'd like to know in the comments below, how do you combat Mekk-Knight Invoked? What do you think of the deck? Do you think the deck will, do you think the deck will survive through the ban list? We've just seen the OCG's ban list, and how I believe Alistair's at 2 and Mekkaba's at 1 and something like that. Obviously, they didn't touch the Mekk-Knights, but I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think that the Invoked engine will continue to stand at full power? I think it's pretty insane. We do have 9 copies of Alistair. We do have our 3 Invocations. We do have 3 Macabas. But overall, I think the Mekk-Knights just add a whole new dimension to the deck. And it'll be interesting to see what the deck continues to do going forward to YCS Salt Lake, as well as Memphis and Nationals and everything. So we'll see what happens. We'll be getting a ban list, I believe they said, in June. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as the meta continues to play itself out. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to smash that like button. Let me know the next episode of how to beat this deck you guys would like to see down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.